Sir, can you tell me your name?
My name is Sammy Rangel.
And you were previously incarcerated.
I have been incarcerated here and in Wisconsin.
All right. So, how long were you incarcerated for? What were the stints?
I was sentenced to 4 years in 1987, but I ended up doing 4.5 years. I spent the majority of that time at Menard Correctional Institution back in, from 88 to 92. I was a part of the race riot that kicked off, and then as a result of that, I spent 28 months in the hole there, and I was eventually paroled from Stateville in 92. And then about 7 months after my discharge from there, I was arrested in Wisconsin for violent gun crimes, and was sentenced to 6 years. Was supposed to do 2 years, but I did 7. And of that 7 years, I probably did about 5 of those years in the hole.
How many times were you in the hole in IDOC, Illinois Department of Corrections, in Wisconsin?
I was in the hole, right. I was only in the hole once in Illinois, and that was for that 28 months. For my participation in the race riot, I ended up assaulting a Superintendent Hopkins at the time. The only inmate killed in that riot, I only knew him by the name of New York. He tried to save my life. I was cornered, being attacked by a bunch of white supremacists, and the shooting had already started, so I got separated from my crowd, and they shot and killed him, and I had to drag him to the front of the building to keep him from being dragged into the cell by the whites. In Wisconsin, on day 1, I racked up like 2 years, and I was sent to the hole for about 2 years, almost immediately upon entry to the department out there, and I spent another 3 years in the hole after I assaulted 4 more guards out there.
And so was this, you being in the hole, was that as a form of punishment or segregation?
It was, and I was put on administrative segregation because I had assaulted an administrator. They can't normally hold you more than a year in the hole, but because of my behavior, they pretty much held me indefinitely. The violence continued in the hole, so the prison was pretty much on lockdown for like 9 months after the initial fighting, but the fighting never stopped. So the conditions that we had created through that riot they felt like, because they wanted to make it about gangs when it was really about race. It was white supremacy against blacks, and we supported, jumped in to help, and that was my first experience in the hole, and probably one of the worst. Even in the hole, the men rioted, so they were burning things, attacking guards, attacking each other, and as I was, and I was being beat up by the guards almost routinely, partly in retaliation for what I did in population to the superintendent, but also because I was pretty hostile in the hole, and you almost had to be. If you weren't hostile, you weren't going to fit into that environment. The racism continued, the battles continued. I was a gang member, and so I was surrounded by oppositions, but on my left was a white supremacist, and we fought all the time. And I actually assaulted him while he was in his cell. I burned him, and I burned his cell down. It was pretty corrupt back then, so I was able to kind of do whatever I wanted in the hole, so to speak. So I used to make wine every day. So I used to drink every day. I used to pop pills every day. I was getting high every day. I had a position in my gang, so I had influence and was able to get what I wanted. But to be honest, I was like 8 or 10 hours from home. There were no visits. My family was already pretty torn apart, so there wasn't a lot of mail. But when my visitors did try to come in the beginning, they were turned away because of my status. And it was a unique experience. I think I went from a gangbanger to a person who was homicidal, and I remember the switch flipping in the sense where the game just got a lot more serious than it was when I first went in there. We barely got out of the cells. We were getting out twice a week for like 15 minutes at a time.
And how big were the cells?
They were small. I would say probably 4 feet wide by maybe 8 feet. I don't remember the exact dimensions, but they weren't that big. Between your bed and your wall, there was only like enough space to walk. So the rooms were narrow. You know, we were pretty stacked. You know, you could probably get the exact dimensions. I mean, the prison, you know, is still there, so it's not hard to get. Roach infested, no lights. Some of the cells they had me in were completely sealed shut. So, you know, they're had metal welded to the bars so that you could not see out. And there were times when they isolated me because of, you know, I was able to kind of create problems through other inmates. So they would put me in places where I couldn't talk to anyone. The inmates back then who were the gallery cleaners, they couldn't come by my cell. The guards were the ones who had to give me my my supplies or my food or anything like that, you know. And it's kind of humiliating too, because when they take you out, they you have to strip. You know, you're already in the hole, right? But now you got to strip to get your handcuffs on. So you got to take your clothes off, put them through the trap, and then of course, you know, bend over, spread them, cough, that crap, and then come out, and then you get dressed, and then pat search you again, and then run a metal detector over you, which was a joke, because we were going through all that, and yet when right in that 9 months when that riot ended, when they would put us on the in the hole out in the rec yard, the whites were coming out and were bringing out shanks. You know, they were armed. They could smuggle their shanks to the rec yard in the hole, but we were completely disarmed. You know, and that's when you knew like the racism was real. Like, you know, it wasn't just in our heads. You know, it wasn't like a race card we were trying to pull. No, it was real. Well, in GP, you know, you have a lot of movement. You know, you get to go and see your friends. You can go to the yard. You're out every day. You engage in school. You know, you go to chow and you socialize, you eat, you know, you get a little more exercise and movement, you know, and social interaction and human contact. You know, it's still a maximum prison, but, you know, it was, you had like somewhat of a inmate life, you know, where you could at least engage with people and you had things to look forward to. In the hole, man, you know, you're stuck. You know, there is no escape. There's little to no human contact outside the people next to you, and hopefully you're next to people you get along. Unfortunately, I wasn't for a long time. You know, it's dirty, it's dingy. It's, you know, that's why I started drinking. You know, I was probably drinking 2 or 3 gallons a day myself. You know, and was able to kind of fend for myself by selling it, and, you know, I made a life for myself there. You know, but you kind of start to have to shut your feelings off to a degree that's even more so than it's to the point even today where I'm not sure how people feel about me, because I still feel numb when it comes to my social interactions with people. I can walk through here, but I feel like I still don't fit in. You know, I've been out quite a long time, but I don't feel like I fit in. I have to think my way through things that I see other people feeling their way through. You know? It's weird because a part of my transition was going through therapy, would help me change my life. But the therapy I went through taught me that I couldn't be a victim. I had to take responsibility for my crimes, and so I wasn't really allowed or ever walked through a process to deal with my own stuff. So I put it away, and I've had a fairly successful life out here. However, I recently went through a divorce, and that meant that I was at home alone a lot, and I haven't been alone for a long time since I got out, but now I'm in my home, and now I'm alone, and I started reliving what it was like to be in the hole, and it was like I didn't want to, but it was like I was comparing being at home alone like being in the hole, and that came back as such a shock and had such a severe impact on me. Like, I became suicidal, you know, and I haven't been suicidal in 25 years, but it was like driving me crazy, and, you know, and I could hear and experience and see things as if they were still happening. And you know, I'm a mental health therapist, you know, I'm in the field. Like, I hadn't experienced that before, and I knew kind of what was happening, but you know, when you're going through it, there's not a lot you can do for yourself. So after I took some extreme steps that scared me, you know, I started to reach out for help. And I actually, by the grace of God, partnered with a doctor out here who's dealing with post-traumatic stress injury. he's not calling it a disorder, he's calling it an injury, because these are things that are done to us, you know, they're not necessarily a disorder. And you know, I had to find a specialist that could talk to me about what it was like to be in the hole. It's 17 years later, man, I'm dealing with being in the hole still, you know, and it's left a scar on me, you know. It's robbed me of, in some ways, of feeling like I'm human, feeling like I'm totally present for my own daughters, my own sons, you know, because sometimes I kind of have a flat affect, you know, and I want to engage, I want to feel more, but sometimes that's still restricted, you know, and it's painful, because you're aware that you're acting odd, but you're incapable of changing that now, you know. And the majority of men and women are coming home, and you don't want people who are coming home walking out here with those kind of scars and wounds. It wasn't an accident I went back to prison, even for more violent crimes and aggression, you know. Nobody helped me turn that off, and there's no one still today to help you turn that off. So I think it's detrimental if we want people to re-enter and be successful.